And we're ready to roll.
All right, let's do it.
It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans?
He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome into the Redbird Reboot podcast. We're here after the Arizona Cardinals got thrashed 40-20 this past Sunday up against the Houston Texans. It got a very important game we'll talk about going up against a team that's got pretty high draft pick along with them, but that draft pick does not belong to them, and the Atlanta Falcons belongs to the division rival Los Angeles Rams, setting up a crucial showdown in what is probably one of the most should say at least, Marcos. There's all three of these games down the stretch for the Arizona Cardinals are all winnable games, which we'll get to talk about at least. But this team has just been consistently losing against bad teams. It started with just what was a rough first drive where the Houston Texans scored almost immediately on I believe it was a 57-yard touchdown to Nico Collins, followed by a fumbled kickoff return. That had the Cardinals down 10-0 before the offense even took a snap. And the game pretty much went downhill from there, with Arizona really not putting up a lot of points or a lot of a push, at least, up until they got into the fourth quarter, essentially, or at the end of the third quarter, and of course the one touchdown that they had in Michael Wilson in the fourth quarter. Just more of the same for this team, which is now 3-11. They are 2-5 away, with the one of those wins being against the Dallas Cowboys, and the other being against, of course, in the opening part of the season, the New Orleans Saints, who are coming on relatively strong. They lose to a 9-5 Houston Texans team, in which that team had struggled to put up 24, 25 points on the board week in and week out. If you look at their average points scored throughout the week, they don't just put up 30 on Arizona, they put up a full 40, just a shellacking that has continued, Marcos, to be the theme of this team. They don't just lie down flat. You can look at injuries, the amount of guys they lost. Bam Knight in the game. They released defensive lineman Justin Jones today, essentially with an injury settlement because he was on IR, unable to play. They're nearing the amount of roster moves that a team can make throughout the season. The question, of course, is how much of this is an excuse and how much of this is just simply a sorry football team that really is getting perpetually beaten down when it comes to good football teams like the Houston Texans.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the scheme has remained the same for like 3 years now. It's kind of surprising that last year they were actually one of the top 15 in the league when it came to, at least blitzing and throwing pressure. And if you know me, I'm not really like the biggest fan of like blitzing just for the heck of blitzing, but you do need to get more pressure on the quarterback, and that's the one thing that they haven't been able to do consistently for whatever reason. They have all the confidence in the world with their 4 down linemen, and I know a lot of criticism going towards Tomlinson's way, but Tomlinson's a nose tackle. Those nose tackles usually don't get any more than like 15 to 20 pressures a year and stuff. He's more of like a run stuffing type of nose tackle that can take on like at least double teams and whatnot. That's what you want him to do. And in those circumstances, of course, you're going to try to vacate 2 people so that your other guys at the very least get somewhat of one-on-ones in advantageous situations. And it just hasn't happened. It's unfortunate going to year 2 with somebody like Darius Robinson, who at the most part, I see him more of like a run-stopping defensive like end or defensive tackle. But when it comes to like a penetrator, he just hasn't been that thus far.
No, it hasn't been something that we wanted to be able to see. It's continually been one of those cases where the Cardinals have struggled to get pressure. And we even talked about the lineup and the matchup with the Cardinals going into this week about how what we wanted them to be able to do is to see pressure off of the left side with Josh Sweat to be able to get after. We ended up seeing the Cardinals having one sack that was credited up the middle to Walter Nolan on what seemed to be a coverage sack. CJ Stroud essentially ended up kind of having to step forward, scrambled up the middle. I believe originally it was given to Akeem Davis-Gaither. They changed that post-game to make it where it was definitely Nolan who did trip him up, which we were able to see watching the game live. Stroud had a pretty easy and comfortable day in the pocket. He completed 22 of 29, got 260 yards. He got one sack, as like we said, no interceptions. Jacoby Brissett also had 3 touchdowns. The biggest difference, of course, being the run game. We mentioned Bam Knight went down due to injury. That meant that there was Michael Carter took on the brunt of the load. He still got 4 yards per carry, but it was Corey Kiner, who they called up from the practice squad, I believe, just before the game, that ended up taking on a couple of carries. Cardinals just threw the ball in this game. There was 12 catches for 134 yards. Trey McBride sets a record. He's now a record holder, at least when it comes down to the NFL, the most amount of games with 5+ catches by a tight end, passing up the legendary Travis Kelce. You talked to Trey McBride post-game. Michael Wilson, of course, we said had a touchdown. Trey McBride had 2 touchdowns for those of you playing fantasy, good luck against him in the fantasy playoffs. Michael Wilson, of course, had his touchdown, but it was late, kind of when the Texans had given up a little bit in the fourth quarter. As Trey McBride said after the game, it did not matter to him what he held because the team has been on such a losing streak. This has been their 6th game in a row that they've lost, Marcos. They've got 3 games left in the season to turn it around, but this one stung going onto the road because it was over before it even began, is how you felt with those 2 errors right off the get-go.
Yeah, it sucks that we haven't been able to at least keep up or kind of take off with these other teams or keep the score going. It's really difficult when your defense is giving up points early in the game, and you can't make the excuse that, oh hey, they're just tired, they've been playing too much time, or the offense can't move the ball when you're giving up the first score of the game, or when you're on your second drive and you're giving up a score. And I've been really I've been holding it up to the defense about the scheme, and the scheme ultimately has just remained the same when it comes to the type of coverages that they call. They call a lot of cover 3 on first down. They call a lot of basically cover 2 or Tampa 2 on second or third down. They got burned twice in a row calling the same type of coverage with the same personnel, doing the same exact thing. Buda Baker being the pole runner, ADG being the hook dropper, and as the hook dropper. One instance, he came down to drive on a shallow route, and then the pass was thrown behind him for a completion, and then the opposite thing happened the next time. He was able to carry and wall off the route. I think it was by Nico Collins delivering it to the pole runner. Guy in the shallow goes, catches the ball, gets an easy 14, 15 yards. So when they are able to see what you're running and know how to beat it, that's when you're asking yourself, what are we doing defensive-wise?
Yeah, super simple, ultimately, at least, is how it looked. Let's do ahead real quick, Marcos, and we're going to shift and show fans just a little bit of that scene that we saw here with the Cardinals. This is, of course, that first touchdown. You're talking about what looks to be a pretty simple quarters coverage across the top of the board. You've got Buda Baker dropping back into the safety, just rushing 4. This is just essentially, they said they were going to play more base personnel. They do play that. They drop back CJ Stroud. You can see, at least right from the get-go, the way that this is designed is to take advantage of the fact that Garrett Williams, coming off of injury, does not have the same lateral quickness that he used to. He can drop forward and drop backwards, but when it comes to the lateral quickness, it's not the same. And against someone like Nico Collins, you can see he kind of lines him up, and he doesn't even have to essentially do anything. He just runs away. There's no rub route. There's no anything there. This is just completely one man beating another man, and without having the safety help, you look over the top of the field. And Buda Baker, he's got his eyes down over here in the wrong spot. One of those things we can talk about with Buda is that he just has not had the most effective year dropping back into the safety coverage versus being able to make plays at the line, being an extra blitzer like we were able to see last year and what was a Pro Bowl caliber season for him a year ago. Collins just runs away, and when Buda takes a bad angle here, you can see at least that he comes down. He needs to run more further upfield. Instead, they both go for it, and it is just a brutal missed tackle. Cardinals have the most missed tackles in the NFL. Jonathan Gannon was asked about that today, and he said that there's certain rules that mean that you can't work on it in season because there's only so many practices that you have. There's only so much you can be able to do with it. That was probably one of the weakest answers that I can remember, because what you want to hear your coach say is, yes, we see that. We know we're the worst tackling team. this is how we're going to fix it. And we're already working on fixing it. And then you go out there and see it fixed. Instead, Marcos, I think the answer is, hey, guess what? We can't really do anything about it because of the league rules. Weak answer for the most part, and it leads to these sort of missed tackle attempts that you see in the game. This is just one of those areas where it was pretty brutal to be able to watch as both of those guys go after the tackle, and yet Nico Collins is able to just scamper into the end zone.
Well, my question about this type of coverage was because you obviously on the sideline view you can see that Keaton Crawford like rotates downward, and he's trying to do that because I think he's trying to give help to that the hook dropper, which is ADG on that little quick like hitch route and whatnot, that semi Texas stunt that I was or Texas route that I was calling out. Garrett Williams is obviously lined up on outside leverage, and he's gonna try to funnel that crosser over to his help with the safety. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, if he's attacking this with pure taking the outside, having the outside leverage, trying to funnel that play in, was Keaton Crawford was he supposed to be in that zone, readily able to be able to drive on that ball, to be able to make the play if he had to drive down, at least be able to make the tackle? Because it looked to me like Budda Baker was kind of caught off guard, and he had to, as you can see, T-stepped, was now running obviously parallel to the lines and stuff, to the yard lines and whatnot. And at that point, I mean, it was already too late for him to be able to make a play. He just had to pray that he can get there fast enough.
I think this is scheme because of the way that the safeties had rotated. You see Crawford, as soon as the ball is snapped, he rotates forward, Budda rotates backwards. So I think that this was just a case where the Cardinals, they would like to rotate their safeties. They'll see at least pre-snap, they'll rotate one down, rotate one back. So essentially that pushes it into a cover 3 look where you've got 4 guys rushing the passer, 7 defensive backs, which is supposed to be a numbers mismatch. I think that this is just a play that they had out scheme knowing, hey, guess what? We know ahead of in advance. Cardinals are going to drop one safety back. They'll pull one safety forward. All you got to do is run a slant route to the middle of the field, and that guy's going to keep on running. That's an example of being out-coached, in my opinion. I don't think that this is a spot where Crawford was wrong. If you even look at with the 2 guys that are coming out, you've got 1, 2 guys have 3 guys. 1, 2 guys have 3 guys on them. I think this is one of those cases where unless Crawford is supposed to drop and fill the middle of the field, they're expecting that crossing route to be kind of covered by ADG, who's already working at least on the tight end coming out. The safety's there over the top. You're supposed to be winning in the numbers game, but instead of that, I think Budda Baker right now, he just made a poor angle is what I think had happened, because he's in perfect position. If you're looking at where this is here, where if he throws this ball, if Budda runs to the spot right around here in the middle of the field, that's where you're going to see that tackle be able to get made. Instead, he runs straight forward up more east to west instead of more north to south, more of a direct angle. And Collins is just too fast. He just runs away from Williams, and then that's where you can see that poor angle that is taken. It's a bummer to see it as kind of a mistake from your defensive captain, but it's just one of those cases, at least, where you see how Budda had to readjust his angle. He just was not expecting Collins to be as fast once he did be able to get the ball and get upfield. And I think it's an example of the Cardinals getting schemed into a look that leads to one of these big sort of plays, which we've seen far too many of them already for the Cardinals this season. It's been a couple of long touchdowns the last week against the Rams and a couple of long plays and touchdowns now against the Texans. The coverages are just not holding up very well. And like you said, this isn't a case where it's I think the safety who is the younger player did his job. I think it is just a spot where the Cardinals were just beaten by a better player in Collins and out-schemed by a better coaching staff.
Well, unfortunately, they set a pick for each other, so there's really not much they could have done in that situation. And that's the worst possible case you could have, is that like you have 2 of your own defenders, 2 of your own players just essentially giving that touchdown up because of the fact that they run into each other, take each other out. I've seen this way too many times, and it's usually with like very badly coached teams when it comes to like tackling and technique. So for him to bring up that like, hey, we only have so much time to practice, that's bull, because you have other teams that are better disciplined. What do you say about the teams that have like 72 missed tackles or 80 missed tackles at this time? They had 129 last time I checked. They're probably upwards of 150. That's bad. That's just bad technique and bad coaching.
Yep, it is. And speaking at least, so there is also other things that can pop up, such as bad luck. For example, the ensuing kickoff that the Cardinals had after that touchdown we know how this one went. The ball gets kicked off. You've got essentially backup kick returners in because it's not going to be Amari DiMercado. This is going to be the wide receiver Brooks, who is another practice squad call-up because the Cardinals have not had healthy receivers that they've been able to have. So they end up kicking the ball off. It's kicked off. He catches the ball. Texans are just a more physical team. You see that the blocks and the setup that's there for him to run right up the middle. This is essentially just a get the ball, run up the middle, give a guy a hit as best as you can, and then make sure that you get down. What ends up happening instead is you get a helmet on a ball right there, and it pops up right into Dare Ogunbowale, right into his hands. I had to practice that several times just to make sure that I got the last name pronounced there right. Gets a helmet on a hat, and this is just what happens. But I would say that this is part of what I would call the injury bug biting the Arizona Cardinals. It's inexperienced kick returners, inexperienced punt returners that are back there. You see number 37 is back there with 86 because you've got the injury that was there with the rest of the kick returners and a needed role for Bam Knight where he couldn't be a kick returner. He ended up, of course, getting hurt in the game anyway. Texans were able to only be held to a field goal after this. Like, at least they were able to stop some of what we were looking at, but ultimately, Marcos, game felt like it was over before it began, and we've seen that happen now, not just against NFC West opponents, but in the Seahawks and the Rams, and with that blowout game that we were able to see against, I believe it was the Niners. We've now seen it on the road against a team in the Texans. Cardinals have now given up 40 points in 4 of their last 6 games. We can say unacceptable, inexcusable, fireable, whatever words you want to say, we can say them, and yet it doesn't shake the feeling that many fans have that Jonathan Gannon's going to just coast by into next year with some excuses about injuries. And I think that's where a lot of fans have been frustrated because this team, you would hope, would be able to show some signs of turning it around with a couple of games left, or go to a bad offense in the Houston Texans, who's got a great defense, hold on to the ball, don't turn the ball over. There was another interception that we saw, at least with Jacoby Brissett, that ended up resulting in points for the Houston Texans. This is a team that cannot get out of its own way, and as a result, that's why we're seeing these 40 burgers get hung onto this Cardinals defense. And on the offensive side, they're not hanging 40. They're only getting about 17 to 20 points a game. They're giving up somewhere between about 30 to 40 points a game. It is one of those nightmare seasons for Arizona, and it feels, Marcos, like it's getting worse as the more players are getting injured, not getting better. And that should be some cause for concern if the Cardinals can win any games coming up down the stretch.
I feel like a lot of this is due to culture. So I never really bought into like the whole culture thing being a big difference maker. And then I think about like some of the best teams in the NFL, and I think about like when they walk into their stadium, when they walk into like their training facility, when they do everything for each other, the culture actually does matter towards like players taking care of themselves, players doing stuff to be able to avoid getting injured, a coach that actually cares, a training staff that actually does do their job and making sure that the players are always conditioned and whatnot, and they have the ability to be able to like avoid injuries due to the fact that they are so conditioned, that their muscles are always warmed up, that they're not just taking off in the cold and whatnot and then just pulling the muscle, or they could be something that could deteriorate down the line and then make it worse, and that's what leads into bigger injuries. It's like those little instances of like not taking care of a certain thing. We all know that like Achilles tears happen because you have like a sore Achilles or something. You have something that has been lingering, and then eventually it just becomes a bigger injury, and then you lose bigger players down the line. I don't understand how you could have this many injuries this quick with this fast succession. I can tell you one thing: since they don't like to play their starters during preseason, they don't get that conditioning during preseason. They just go into week 1, and then we see them drop like flies after that.
Yeah, it gets heartbreaking to have to do this week in and week out, Marcos. It really wears on you ultimately. It's something that I think is worn on every single fan. I know a lot more fans we've talked more about. There's less and less fans that are renewing season tickets. We could talk about some of the positives that we were able to see, at least. The nicest thing that we can say, at least, about this team is that they figured out a way to funnel passes to Trey McBride. He's been carrying their offense. They have no run game. They struggled to get the ball to Michael Wilson. Kamari Lassiter did get an interception. He's the son of Kwame Lassiter, a longtime Cardinal, of course. And a lot of what it comes down to, I think, mirrors what McBride said, where, hey, Doesn't matter if he's going to set NFL records, have one of the best fantasy seasons we've ever seen from a tight end, one of the best tight end seasons we've ever seen in the NFL, because it's on a bad team. And that's where I gets the comp of, are we just watching Larry Fitzgerald 2.0, of watching this incredibly talented player in his prime being wasted on some of these bad teams that we were able to see that are not able to get to the playoffs? It's where I think the Cardinals are going to have to be aggressive to some degree in the next year, perhaps next year or even 2 years, to be able to get this train wreck fixed. And I think, Marcos, that some of it we can talk for whatever it is, but until the coaching at least is officially set in stone of coming back, we have to be able to look at this as part of the grade that goes for Jonathan Gannon. And so far, what we can say is that it should be considered a failing grade, even when the team is considerably beat up. This is where it reminds me a lot of the late Cliff Kingsbury season. You're missing your starting quarterback. You are missing a lot of players due to injury. And you just gave the guy a 5-year extension. You still went out and fired him at the end of the year because things were just so despicable. It could be following that same pattern. I think that this upcoming game against the Atlanta Falcons that we'll preview here in a bit is going to be tremendous for figuring out, do the Cardinals have a shot? Because they do have the chance of playing a couple of teams that could give them a shot to win one down the stretch, to kind of say, hey, we can right the ship. We're going to move stuff in a positive direction. We're not going to lose out on 9-game losing streak to end the season, is what I think that the goal needs to be for this Cardinals team. Just to kind of wrap up about the game, at least for that, were there any other thoughts that you had? I think the biggest one I saw ultimately was the poor tackling, which a lot of times tackling is about technique and willingness. And like you said, that's where culture comes from, both culture of practicing, culture of using technique, culture of learning from mistakes. Woody Marks got hurt in the game after he scored a touchdown on essentially what was considered a fumbled touchdown. Yeah. It was snapped through the legs of CJ Stroud, went to Woody Marks. He picked it up, ran the ball in. Arizona seemed a little bit kind of fooled whether it was an intentional play or not. It looked like it was one of those plays that some team could pick up for. It almost felt like one of those plays that Cliff Kingsbury would have done, a direct snap through Kyler's legs to James Conner. James Conner then runs it in. One of those sort of Cliff plays that you would have seen. You're like, oh, that's cool. We should steal that. I don't know if this one was intentional, because the way it was snapped, it bounced off the inside of CJ Stroud's legs. It was snapped pretty fast, bounced at least just right to Woody Marks, and he's able to run it in. Marks went out, and it was Jawar Jordan, who's basically gotten hardly any. I think this is his first time actually toting the rock in the NFL as far as getting more than 5 carries. He had 15 carries, had 101 yards, 6.7 yards a carry. It was the backup running back. And a lot of it came down to just poor tackling. We can say at the point of attack, the Cardinals were not disruptive up front. There was times where I was watching the game where I would just groan, because I would look at it and I'd say, you got your 4 guys up front. You got your 3 linebackers behind them. You got your defensive backs there. No one in the front 7 was getting any push. The front 4 weren't getting a good push. And this is when you're looking at what Walter Nolan wasn't on the field. You got run right up the middle. The linebackers aren't able to get a push. It came to the safeties had to come down to make the tackle. That was way too similar to the Steve Wilkes defense that we saw in 2018. And it's not that the Cardinals were totally beat up front. Like, this is mostly their starting unit that we're seeing, with having guys like Calais healthy, having Walter healthy. They've got Darius Robinson healthy, Josh Sweat's healthy. They did have to lose, I believe it was Cody Simon due to injury, but Akeem Davis-Gaither's been a starting linebacker for them for the most part this year. So, like, you're really not talking at least about anything in the front 7, and which is what we've talked about being essential to the Arizona Cardinals' success, is that this front 7 was where they had invested a ton into the offseason. It is just one of those spots where it felt like the Cardinals kind of gave up a little bit in the game and were just content to get steamrolled. And then they had a little bit of offensive fight. But ultimately, when a team scores 40 points on you, and this is one of the other times where they got outscored in every single quarter that they played, they were outscored. The only reason why they weren't outscored in the second quarter, I think this is mentioned on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, was the blocked field goal. Calais Campbell still putting out effort, still doing big men things. He blocked a field goal, but if not for that field goal, it would have been a 43-20 outscored in every quarter. Just lackadaisical sort of game from the Cardinals. And it's got fans frustrated, Marcos. Fans are frustrated indeed.
Yeah, absolutely, and it just really sucks hearing the name Calais Campbell and knowing that this is probably going to be his retirement year, and it's somewhat similar to like a JJ Watt situation where JJ was playing for us, had a really good season or a great season actually, getting 12 sacks and then retiring, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to send off another like a football legend, one that was a Cardinal before, and he's going to go into retirement, and he's just not going to come back and give us that production for another year because I wouldn't even trust this team to even make the playoffs next year because we have no idea what's going to happen, what the turnover is going to be. If we're going to keep this coaching staff, I definitely wouldn't come back because the way that this season's going, they're not riding the ship. They're not making any changes. They're not giving us any confidence. They're not telling us, hey, we're going to correct this problem, just like you said earlier. Like Jonathan Gannon made the excuse that like, oh well, like preseason, we don't have this time to tackle. It's like, well, what do you say about the other teams then? Do other teams have 12 all pros, 11 all pros out on the field at the same time? No, they don't. They have people that they have, and people will get injured, and the people that come in after that do have to do the same exact job that the starter did, and making sure that they at least have formed tackles and whatnot. So it's just bad. But one more thing I'm going to say is, and I want to really pound the table for this. This is going to be the second week in a row where we've seen John Gaines grade well, and I'm seeing it on the film as we speak. I've only seen a third of the offense so far. I had to do the deep. I did a deep. I really focus on the defense, but on third of the offense, John Gaines is really showing that he is a starting left guard in the league. And as for Isaiah Adams, this is the third week in a row where he grades really well in pass protection. So his run blocking is just not all the way there yet, but his pass protection is really been improved. So I'm excited about both these guards.
Yeah, we've seen enough from Isaiah Adams where he went from looking like he could be released or cut after he started this season and then got taken over by Will Hernandez to putting together a solid performance, showing sometimes it takes a bit of time. We'll see how it goes for year 3. I've been high on John Gaines since he was drafted. He had a really rough first season because of that injury where he just basically tore his knee up and needed to rebuild from that. He's been kind of an adept player for them, and they've liked the guys ahead of him. We did not see Evan Brown, the starting left guard, here again. I think that you could see Gaines be a starter for that line next year next to Froholt, which would fill, like we said, one of the interior spots. If you're able to then put Isaiah Adams and say, hey, we like you, but we like you as our backup. Let's go out there and get another competing guard that we can draft somewhere in the first 3 rounds. Maybe you decide to actually go out and say, hey, we like what we've seen from Froholt. Can we get a Pro Bowl caliber center that we're going to try to target in the first 3 rounds? You can move Froholt then over to the guard position where he's played before. At the end of the day, I think that the Cardinals are going to be addressing offensive tackle first and foremost. They should probably look at linebacker after that is one of the most important pieces that I think they should potentially look at when it comes to that. But John Gaines has been, like you said, a nice development. And we'll see some of that on some of these touchdown plays we'll cover with the film study. But before we get to that, it is officially halftime on the Redbird Reboot podcast. Let's go over some of our comments that we have here, starting with Miyazaki Felix saying their points are all garbage time. Same with JB, Jacoby Brissett stats. That is completely true with the Cardinals. They got the one touchdown that they had, which I believe made it a 17-6 game, which made it pretty much close. The Cardinals then gave up another touchdown on the ensuing drive. That's something that was unfortunate, but like we said, when it comes to when we're talking garbage time, it can look a little differently, but it essentially means the game is over. Any points that you see here are going toward something that will not affect the results of the second half, and you can know that because of the comment saying that the Texans could have put up 50 if they tried in the second half. They called off the dogs. One of the things that we can also talk about, at least here, is when we talk about leverage. This is something that we've gone with and talked about with the Cardinals previously. I think we mentioned it slightly last week, but we can harp on it more this week. High leverage situations. When you've got a high leverage situation, would be it's 4th down, and you are within 1 point of the other team in their territory. That's a highest leverage situation you can get because you have to complete the pass, have to run for the first down. Low leverage situations are it's 1st and 10, you pretend like you're going to run the ball, and you run a boot action, play action fake, you bootleg to the right, throw the ball to the tight end for a 5-yard gain. That's about as low leverage as you can possibly get, where it doesn't have any impact, doesn't happen on the score. That can happen from the first quarter all the way to the final play of the game, doesn't matter the score. Those are low leverage situations. As he says, when Josh Sweat gets a sack, there are a lot of times that it can be on third down. Sometimes we'll see on first and second, but often it's not going to be when the game counts or when it matters. It's not going to be in one of these situations. I've seen a couple of sacks that have been there on third down where it has been like a high leverage situation, but they're so few and far in between. The Cardinals really do not have that secondary pass rusher that's able to get after the quarterback. And Sweat, like he's saying, is just not able to be that clutch pass game killer that we saw from someone previously in the Cardinals, such as a Chandler Jones, who would just wreck games, would be able to get a sack, would force a fumble sometimes at least, to be able to actually make a difference on the overall score.
Yeah, he was a runner-up in 2019 for Defensive Player of the Year on a team that only won, I believe, was it like 5 games, or they went I don't know. It was Kyler Murray's rookie year, and Chandler Jones was having a phenomenal year. He had 19 sacks, barely lost the title, the sack title for the year to Barrett. I think it was I forgot what his name was or whatnot, but it was Barrett Shaq Barrett, who just got those sacks on a 3-sack game in the last game of the season. Who were we going up against? The Los Angeles Rams, and they did not give up a sack to Chandler Jones. So thank you, Rams, for screwing us with that one, because he could have had 20 sacks.
Yep.
But he had 8 forced fumbles, and that's what made the difference is in those situations. When you get a sack and you're getting the ball, you're knocking the ball down, or you're doing something that affects the game. It's not just, hey, I got him down on the ground, and then they punt it, and they still have the lead, or like in a situation where like, hey, I got my sack on second down, okay, and then they pick up the first down on the very next play. It's just those situations don't come for the Cardinals. They don't have a playmaker on defense.
Yeah, when it comes to edge defenders, when we're taking a look at what the actual rankings are, when it comes to the cap hit, the total cast, or what I like to look at, which is the contract average per year, when we're talking about what the average per year contract is, I think that Josh Sweat is on an incredible deal. We can at least be able to pull this up so you guys can see it in a little bit larger spot, but you can see at least here with the highest paid player goes to Micah Parsons. You go through Aiden Hutchinson getting his deal. You got guys like Myles Garrett in there. Max Crosby and Nick Bosa are in there. Brian Burns is up there. You got to go all the way down to 16 ahead of Jonathan Grenard and Bradley Chubb for $19 million a year at Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat is producing like a top 10 player when it comes to sack production. Now, the reason why I think he's not getting paid the same as some of these guys is because he's not doing it in these high leverage situations. We saw when Micah Parsons got injured in the Packers game that the Green Bay Packers pass rush looked like it just disappeared. And he was making huge inroads. You can see how Myles Garrett, even on a bad team, he's still kind of helping keep the Cleveland defense in play. I don't think that's supposed to be Josh Sweat's game. I think it's more of just recognizing of who the player is. He's going to be one of those guys, so he's not going to be a Batman, like you're talking about what Chandler Jones was, a TJ Watt, a Myles Garrett, but he's not a Robin. He's not that secondary like pass rusher that's never going to be a top number one. He's going to be kind of in that 1B sort of area. Like I would almost call it like a Nightwing. Like you're not going to job about Batman or Robin, for those fans of the comic books. Nightwing kind of falls in the middle of those two. And that's something where he has been producing in these different spots, but it's not at the same, I would say, like you were talking about, leverage situations that we're hoping for. Part of it is the Cardinals are not putting themselves into some of these good leverage situations either. Let's get to a couple of other comments here. We've got Manifest Mendoza coming from AZ Jace, who wants to get the shot at the number one, or at least favorite right now, depending on how you feel about Oregon's quarterback, number one overall pick. So a lot of people have hoped that the Cardinals could trade up for him in the draft with a team that is needing of a quarterback. We got also on the other side, hashtag Fire Gannon from AZ Chase as well is one of the questions that we've got. We've got Misaki Felix also saying that the bad tackling is a sign of a team that quits on the staff, which proves at least that things are really difficult. We've got a couple other comments we'll get to at least overall here, and we'll see at the end of the game, but at the end of our podcast, I should say. But Marcos, let's go and talk about a couple of positives here, because I do want to point out the touchdowns on our film review that we've had. We've got some great little play action tips from here. You can see this is one of those unique little tricks that the Cardinals play that I'm pretty sure they picked up from around the league. Look who the eligible player is in this spot. Josh Fryer, the left tackle, would normally be Paris Johnson, splits out. This is very similar to the play that the Cardinals saw the Buccaneers run, where there actually was a route run. Instead, you see the other like tight end / fullback area comes in to fill that spot on the line, so it at least has the legal number of guys on the line. And when they snap the ball, you can see it looks like it's going to be a run play. Everything looks like it's going to be. Josh Fryer is out there running a route. Normally, this would be a Paris Johnson. Josh Fryer is out there running a route. What does that do, though? All of the attention is going to go to Josh Fryer. You got 43. It looks like he's going to be wide open for a walk-in touchdown here. Instead, they're running mesh over the middle. When you run mesh with one-on-one coverage, one of these two guys is going to be open. You see the safety takes the wrong angle. He should be running down this way to be able to take on Trey McBride. Instead, he's running down to be able to cover the other player here. It mixes up their man coverage, and Trey McBride gets an easy touchdown. This is never designed for Josh Fryer. This was not designed for Pharaoh Brown, the tight end who slides into kind of being almost an offensive lineman at that spot. This was a Trey McBride design all the way. You can see it. They face it there, and then he just kind of turns his back, runs away from the pressure, touchdown to McBride.
Yeah, I love that design. You have Josh Fryer running the corner route. Like, I would say if he beats that linebacker and he's one on one, I would have loved to have seen him like catch that corner route. But we know he's not gonna have the speed to be able to beat him on that. But I love the design with the mesh concept, and of course you have the safety that's kind of like 7 or 8 yards inside the end zone that has to come down from distance to be able to cover his man. He does eventually get to him, but Trey McBride, it's a hard cover for anybody to like be able to cover Trey McBride. He beat him off the line of scrimmage. I think you're there.
Yeah, speaking of his second touchdown here, we've got that pulled up now. We've got the second one to Trey McBride when talking about him being a hard cover. This is also him just being a hard tackle. Like when Trey McBride runs against you, you just need to get out of the way because he will truck you. He will break that tackle. He ends up just kind of lining his man up one-on-one, sticks that heel in the ground, pulls in. He's got inside leverage. This is very similar to when you're talking about the safety being able to have the leverage on top of with Budda Baker and the angles that he took. Look at how he has to come up. He had to round and go back out instead of taking the direct route. That's just a poor angle from the safety. He still has another safety in front of him who's got a chance to be able to make the play. And Jalen Petrie is just way, way smaller than Trey McBride. McBride at least just is able to run straight up the middle and braces his body for the impact, is able to cross the goal line for a nice long 20-yard touchdown just inside of the red zone. Just what more can you say, at least, about this? Is probably the best Cardinal player that we have that is wearing the uniform this year, just going out there and being able to tough it out in getting that ball across the plane to the end zone on what is essentially kind of a bit of a blow from what the Texans were running. And on the other hand, it is just him beating his man with a great one-on-one matchup on that route.
Yeah, that's a linebacker, and I guarantee you, I know for a fact this is a choice route, so he knew exactly where to attack because, of course, you attack leverage on choice routes. The fact that he was able to be able to like slow his momentum down, be able to cut to the inside and then turn it upfield as fast as he did. That's not something that tight ends are able to do just out of like just the fact that they're able to do that. That's how you know that they're special. Another person that does that very well is Travis Kelce. Another person that does that very well.
Travis Kelce loves option routes so much, at least. But yeah, he lines up. He's got the inside leverage at least here. You can see there's outside leverage, but when McBride runs, at least you can see he just knows that he can win this matchup, and he just runs across his face. He's able to catch that pass with a great, because like you say, you talk about the placement from Jacoby here. Placement is great. Catches him in stride, the full extension of the arms, doesn't cradle it to catch it inside of his body like other receivers would. He just has the actual speed and athleticism just to kind of turn his feet, change the direction a little bit, and get across the goal line. Nothing more, I think, that you can be able to say, at least outside of just like he is more than worthy of being in that number one tight end discussion overall, and is having the number one tight end season of any tight end in the NFL in the year 2025.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Unfortunately, we don't want to waste his time because when you have a tight end that's that good, any quarterback is going to fall in love with him immediately because he is the dirty yards type of guy. He is the mismatch every single game. He is the best friend of every single quarterback that we don't know how many quarterbacks are going to be throwing to Trey McBride, but for the ones that are going to come over, they're just going to love like having him on the team and knowing that he's one of the weapons that you have. It'll make a quarterback's job a lot easier just being able to have him on the team.
Absolutely. We've got one final play that we'll show here with the Michael Wilson touchdown. This one is pretty much identical to a touchdown he had the previous week. This is just a simple out route, back shoulder fade, at least for the most part, where he's attacking. I think it would be almost a corner, I would say, at least as far as it is. But this is just back shoulder fade route. All you got to do is match up your man one-on-one. He gets the guy to overcommit to the inside leverage, goes on the outside, makes it seem like he's going for the fade route. And instead, it's just outside leverage. He basically just goes around and cradles that, gets that touchdown on number 4. He was matched up with Derek Stingley, had another pass that he caught earlier in the game that went super great. I wish we'd have the time to show it to you guys tonight, but this is where you get a mismatch because Stingley, I believe, was not in the game at this point or was on the other side of the field. Brissett just has a nice pocket to go from. You can just see that one-handed snag brings the ball back into his body. Well done by Wilson. We'll probably get to see, at least unfortunately, him take a back seat because Marvin Harrison Jr. is practicing this week against the Falcons. We are going to see A.J. Terrell, who is maybe not having one of his best years. He's had better years in the past. Normally he's an all-pro cornerback, but it is still going to be a tough matchup that we'll be able to see a bit of. But he just reaches out the one hand, is able to snag it with confidence, brings it into his body, and ensures that the defensive back is not able to get that ball, which is just well done. Good for the young man who, in that overall year 3, we always talk about prospects, give them 3 years to know who they are. He showcased that he can be the number 1 target for a team, and that is pretty impressive when you're talking about a guy who is a 3rd-round pick who really has never had more than 600 yards in a season, suddenly being able to blossom into a ensuing, I think at least if I can take a look at right now, he's got a shot to be able to get 1,000 yards on the season. I believe that currently his standard as far as his number of yards is at 766 is where he is at with 66 catches on the year. He's projected to end up finishing with 930 yards. So neither of the Cardinals are projected between him and Marvin Harrison Jr. to get that 1,000 yards. Part of that is the injury back and forth and the fact that Drew Petzing cannot seem to scheme up targets for a second wide receiver to save his life unless those are bubble screens or being able to run either a swing pass or screen passes out of the backfield for guys like a Greg Dortch. Just has not been the case, it seems like, where he's been able to scheme up these things for his Z receiver. And that's one of the biggest improvements the Cardinals, I think, need to make for next year is you got 3 guys who could be a number 1 receiver on this team. You got to be able to have 3 number 1 receivers for this team. I want to see this Cardinals passing attack be able to get back to those 2008 years where you've got 1,000-yard receiver, 1,000-yard receiver, and another 1,000-yard receiver. Instead, you don't got that this year. Cardinals have just not been able to manufacture and have that high leverage passing game like we've been able to see with the 2008 Cardinals in that system with Kurt Warner.
Yeah, well, they couldn't run the ball well in that situation, but in that
they can't run it now either, Marcos. Like they couldn't run the ball back in 2008, and they can't run the ball now, which is hilarious to think about.
Yeah, but it's hard for teams to like, even if you look across the NFL, most teams that have like 1,000-yard like receiver and a tight end, which usually gets like about 150 targets to 111 like catches and whatnot, it's hard to get those two, that dynamic of having that 1,000-yard tight end, that 1,000-yard receiver, and then the other 1,000-yard receiver. The way it usually works is, like if you do have that tight end, that all-pro tight end, or you have your 2 receivers, you'll have 2 1,000-yard receivers. You'll have your 1,200-yard running back on the ground or whatnot. Mm-hmm. That's usually the combination of it. It's not that
it's a balanced offense, at least, and that's what I think they want to run, but they just do not have a running game. They don't have running backs, and even when they had healthy backs, they just were not able to produce.
No, not this year, but if people are. Look, like I love Michael Wilson to be able to step up to that role. And for the people who are dismissing like Michael Wilson's catches, we just saw that catch, that touchdown. They were already down. That was what we would say garbage time. You saw that the corner was defending them. They weren't calling no prevent. Here, go ahead and score on us or anything like that. He was being defended really well. He does work hard. He does get those catches. In only circumstances where like, you see like drop 8 coverage, there are trying to keep the receivers from running outside and keep that clock rolling. If they get a gain or a big gain, whether it's over the middle, whether it's on whatever side. It's not them saying like, "Hey, come get as much yardage as you want. We don't care." It's more of them saying, "Just as long as you don't go out of bounds, that's what our goal is going to be because we want that clock to keep running."
Yeah, exactly. I am very curious to be able to see what happens with Michael Wilson as far as what a contract extension would look like, since that is something that he would be eligible for coming into this offseason.
I think, I mean, it's a no-brainer. They have to do everything they can to try to keep him. They obviously have the advantage of him not having those numbers before, but him showing that he could be that number one receiver. The fact of the matter is, if he was to take that to the market, a team that pays attention would want to pay him. So it's going to be interesting. But like we got to do everything we can to try to keep him. He's going to be like basically the T Higgins to a hopefully like a Jamar Chase situation. You know, you have your number one that is Marvin Harrison Jr. You have another guy that could be your number one on any given day, and he could, you know, they're two different types of receivers, but you know they're both number one like type receivers, both X receivers essentially.
Yeah, it's something at least where, like we said, I'd love to have seen them use Michael Wilson as the prototypical X receiver and then be able to use the flanker or the Z receiver as Marvin Harrison Jr., the guy who can be able to move around almost like you say, hey, we've got a guy we like on back shoulder fades, we like on these out routes, we like him be as far as for how he's a physical football player. Put like that A.J. Brown role and then have Marvin Harrison Jr. be the guy that you would want to run some of the Devonta Smith roles. Now, that being said, questions about if Marv's speed, can he be a deep ball receiver the same way we've seen? I would argue that yes, because of some of those matchups. What we also have seen is teams are giving Michael Wilson one-on-ones. When you're looking at Marv, they look at Marv and say, we don't want this guy to get one-on-one coverage. And that's where there's been a lot of results where Cardinals have just struggled with being able to then funnel passes to Michael Wilson, who's been consistently getting open and beating his man. It's just been, like we said, more evidence of poor coaching, and something that I think we can at least be grateful for, Marcos, is it seems this is likely the last 3 weeks that we'll have to watch with Drew Petzing for this offense, because if it isn't, things are going to be very, very frustrating for a lot of Cardinals fans. I don't know how you can bring the entire staff back. There's going to be some wholesale changes that will be made following a 3-11 start to the season. Let's talk. Oh, go ahead, sir.
When we replace them with someone else and they run the same exact scheme, like if they're running the same type of route variations and they're doing the same running attack and whatnot, like the only way I could see, like, I'm sure Drew Petzing's not coming back because of the whole renewal contract and because of the fan pressure and whatnot.
His contract expires at the end of this season, and it doesn't seem likely they're going to renew it. So that should be your answer right there.
And I would hope that like I'm not sure why Jonathan Gannon still has a job, and I'm not sure why he wants to retain him. But if Jonathan Gannon, as you've seen, is very prideful and he's very like defensive when it comes to his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator, he's protective of his guys. Why would you want to bring that guy who's probably going to be like, well, you know what? Sure, I won't bring back Drew Petzing, but guess what? We're going to get somebody else from that same staff because I want to run the same offense that we've been running because I know this offense can be successful when it's ran to its fullest.
Yeah, that's something at least where I think it comes down to Jonathan Gannon. He's been loyal to a fault. We saw, however, that when you're loyal to a fault, you still have to make good coaching decisions, be able to with your staff. We saw with Bruce Arians always had good coaches. And the 1 year where the Cardinals made it furthest, they did have to fire one of Bruce's guys off of the staff from the special teams to replace him with a better special teams coach. And when they did that, the team actually did produce better on the special team spot. It's something that I think is pretty easy to see outside of the situation. Hard when you've got blind loyalty to some of the coaches like Jonathan Gannon has. It is a little bit of a shift here. Let's talk a little bit, Marcos, now about a upcoming game against the Atlanta Falcons, which I think is huge. So we've got 3 games that are left for the season. Cardinals play a Falcons team, which I believe that the Falcons have a 5-9 schedule. They did win one against a struggling Buccaneers team. By the way, a Buccaneers team who has lost 5 of their last 6 straight. Marcos, can you guess who that one team the Buccaneers would have beaten would be in the last 6 weeks?
They would have beaten. I mean, it was the Cardinals, right?
That is absolutely correct, Marcos. The Cardinals seem to be a get-right team for bad teams, unfortunately. And it could be the case again with this Falcons team, which did get a win last week. On the defensive side, you can see at least they have 2 of their first-round picks. You've got Michael Walker, or excuse me, I think it is not Michael Walker, but Jalen Walker. Sorry, it's
Walker.
Michael Williams, Jalen Walker. And then you've got the speed rusher on the other side, at least, who's more of the James Pierce Jr. Think of Walker as the run stuffer, who's kind of going to be like their version of Zaven Collins, who also has upper body strength, but isn't necessarily a natural speed rusher. Whereas Pierce is that natural speed rusher. He's going to get the matchup against Beecham. We know that Paris Johnson has been ruled out, so we'll see how Fryer does up against Walker. Rook Orohoro is someone who's struggled a lot up the middle, so you should be able to run on this Falcons team up front. But their linebacker play has been actually pretty solid, and that's something where the matchup for Trey McBride is going to be there. Yep, that is correct. Divine Diablo, at least, is the one who's been playing well. It is something that's been fun because he's a guy that's bounced around a little bit, but he's having a fantastic season. And, of course, they've got two great safeties in Jesse Bates, and on the other side, I believe this is, Xavier Watts is the one who it is. Cardinals, I think, in this spot, if they do end up getting back Marvin Harrison Jr., they'll get a great matchup up against, I believe this is, Kobe Bryant. There's also, I believe, another Alford. This feels like there's been an Alford playing for the Falcons for 10 years, but yeah, D. Alford is who it actually is. So not Robert Alford, the one-time Cardinal who kind of semi left the team in a little bit of an embarrassing fashion. This is D. Alford who is there. Cardinals should be able to win the battle through the air. The Falcons set a record for a win with the most penalties. They had 19 penalties in a game, Marcos. That is more than the Arizona Cardinals had in their highly penalized game. The issue that I think that we're looking at here is when it comes to the Cardinals, how can you stop this offense? Because while Kirk Cousins has not necessarily been the same dynamic quarterback you've seen in the past, they have a good offensive line that had some penalties. If they're not committing penalties, you've got Darnell Mooney out of the slot. You're going to be getting back likely. Drake London is what it looks like he's practicing this week. They're hopeful that he's able to play. And Kyle Pitts has lit the league on fire. Last week he had 166 yards, 11 of 12 catches, and 3 touchdowns. And I know that because I went up against him in fantasy last week. And I was like, why in the world is it that of all weeks, Kyle Pitts has to be the one to go out there and do it? He's having a phenomenal contract season. It's one of those things where it's going to be interesting to see if he ends up sticking around with the Falcons. Do they keep him? Do they franchise tag him? Is this a spot where, like, the Kansas City Chiefs go, hey, we've got our Travis Kelce replacement. We're going to throw some money at him in free agency? I don't think the Cardinals, even if Will Johnson gets a tough matchup against a hurt Drake London, I don't know if the Cardinals can stop all of these weapons because there's one other weapon in particular we haven't mentioned yet that is someone who can go off. Cardinals let a no-name running back go off of them last week for over 100 yards, and this ain't a no-name running back. This is Bijan Robinson, who is there back behind there, having a phenomenal season as a running back for the Atlanta Falcons. I think that this combination up against what this Cardinals defense has been, I don't know if it's a 40-point game because the Falcons, I don't think they're that efficient when it comes to it because of the penalties. Boy, oh boy, do I think this is a tough matchup for the Arizona Cardinals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I don't know why did they have Robinson starting over was it Walter Nolan at this point? I mean, I like Robinson as a run stuffer, but obviously he's not that impact player that Walter Nolan is. So I don't really get that. It's just part of coaching politics and whatnot. But Robinson, what is he, like the Tucson native and whatnot?
Yeah, I think when the Cardinals moved into nickel defense, that's where Walter Nolan comes in. This is what their normal front is a lot of times they'll play more out of nickel than base because you'll be seeing how the base they've spent more of their time in nickel because that allows them to essentially have that kind of quarters look that they'll have with being able to bring on an extra defensive back because they can then keep Garrett Williams on the field. They can move Denzel Burke off of the field if they need to for base defense and then keep those safeties back there. They've got Darren Hall starting, but we saw a little bit of him rotating with Xavier Crawford. Hall, I know, was someone who I believe popped up onto the injury report this last week for Arizona, but it's not a matchup that I think that is very favorable. Even the Calais Campbell advantage that you can see, he's getting matched up against one of the best guards in the NFL in Chris Lindstrom. I just don't see this as a game that I think the Cardinals are winning. It's the final home game of the season. I think that there's just too many weapons with Drake London coming back. Even with the Cardinals getting a boost from Marvin Harrison Jr.'s return, I just don't think that this defense is going to be up to the par of being able to stop a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins and the weapons that he's going to have behind what's been a solid Falcons line. Falcons are a team that has gotten in their own way and really has quarterback questions for next year. They even said this morning all everything is on the table at quarterback because Michael Penix tore his ACL again. Kirk Cousins is on a huge deal that is a lot more money than for what he's been playing, where he looks like he's finally started to slow down and get a bit older, doesn't have the same arm strength or drive that he used to. Still has been effective at being able to be a quarterback, but they're probably going to be back in the quarterback market. It's a team you could drop Kyler Murray onto, and you'd be able to see potentially a playoff team in that weak NFC South division. I just think that when it comes to the rest of the season, now, that being said, the Cincinnati Bengals got blown out by the Baltimore Ravens. That's a road game you're talking about, so it would be at home for the Bengals, but that is going to be, at this point, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins you're still having to go up against. The Bengals are the worst team in the NFL at defending against the tight end. They have given up more yards to the tight end this season than Trey McBride has on the season.
Oh boy.
So Trey McBride is going to go off against the Bengals. That's where it's another winnable game. And then the question for week 18 is that going to be a week where the Rams rest some of their starters? Does Puka rest? Do they not rush Devontae Adams back while he's out this week? Do they sit Matthew Stafford and start Jimmy Garoppolo? Is that one of those things where the Cardinals have their most winnable game potentially is against a bunch of backups? And that's unfortunate if that's going to be the case, because the Rams could just rest people and maybe potentially still go out for another sort of last gasp win to try to save his job for Jonathan Gannon, if that is where things are trending. Or maybe that point the tank is in and the Cardinals are going to just drop that game in kind of a pretty lackadaisical, almost preseason type game. But I had plotted this as the most winnable game for the Cardinals to end the year because of how flawed the Falcons have been on the season as a 5-9 team, and because of how difficult it will be to take on Joe Burrow with a healthy and established set of weapons. I'm starting to think, Marcos, that this is a Cardinals team that could go 3-14 on the season, and I think that this is the best chance you have at home to right the ship, get a win against the Falcons, prove that there is things that are working and that coaching is being able to be listened to by the players, get that win, and then even if you drop the last 2 games of the season, you'll at least have proven that you're able to get a little bit of a leg up heading into 2026, if indeed Jonathan Gannon is going to be retained as the Cardinals head coach. Drop this game and suddenly people are going to say you've lost 7 in a row. Don't win the last 2 games. Just drop those 2 games out, hit the reset button, start everything over. That's where I think I'm going to be very curious to see how the Cardinals respond, because I think they knew they were not going to beat the Houston Texans on the road. This is a home game against the Falcons. Very different situation and a very different scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point is that's what I keep asking myself. Is it even like worth even winning at this point? Because yeah, you could still win this game. You get your 4th game. You probably drop a couple spots when it comes to like the draft order. But what are you proving? What would you want them to win this game so that they can be like, yeah, see, there you go. Like, this is the reason why we need to retain the staff. And then they go up and use that as a way of saying, look, we've had injuries, but we coached the hell out of ourselves out of losing this game versus the Atlanta Falcons, who are not having a good season to begin with anyway. And you go forward like thinking to yourself, hey, this staff is so close, but they can get it together. I've heard that for 2 years now. I've heard we're so close, we're almost there, we're so close. It's like that. Enough is enough. And to me, it's like at this point, even if we do like win this game, what good would it benefit in the long term for the Cardinals? Losing out of draft position, possibly keeping a coach that it's going to be the coach selecting the next quarterback and getting this team together, the general manager that's going to put that team together as well. To me, I'm so apathetic, and I even posted it right after the loss. I was like, I'm just apathetic now.
It's so unfortunate to be a fan of the team at this time. The hope is that things will get better for them in the future, but it may take a few years to get there, and that's what teams will then continue to keep building their current process, keep their build going, and it's tough for a Cardinals fan who feels like we are about to hit the rebuild button yet again after 3 years of already doing a rebuild.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead here and be able to start the end of our show. We're going to be heading into overtime now. So we got some of your comments we'll be doing in overtime. We've got Doc's Cards asking if there's any juice with a Joe Burrow trade. That's the question. A lot of fans have looked at Joe Burrow's comments. I think that for most Cardinals fans, we would say, hey, send them 3 first-round picks and Kyler Murray, hands down, if that's something you can do. I don't see it happening. I think that Joe Burrow is going to have to take the Carson Palmer route. I think he's going to have to retire from the Bengals, say, I'm never playing for you again. I'm not showing up. I've got money that's held over in the bank to be able to get out of that team, because that team, unlike the Cardinals, has no other better options, and he is too good of a quarterback for anything to take place with him there. I don't think that there's any juice that is there, at least. The other question is, if you're Joe Burrow and you could have the opportunity to get traded to another team that's looking for an upgrade at the quarterback, why would it be Arizona? With the line, the weapons, I think there's a great argument to be able to be made for it. But I also don't think that we live in that sort of a world where it's super simple of like fantasy football, just here, I'll trade Kyler Murray and a couple dynasty picks, I'll get back Joe Burrow. Joe is just one a different level when it comes down to with being an automatic top 10, sometimes top 5 level of quarterback when it comes to the production. He's had injuries that have plagued him. He didn't play through a lot of this year, part of that because of spotty protection that he is getting with that offense as well, being one that just does put him back and empty a lot where he takes a lot of hits. We've also got Doc's card saying, bring back Carlos Dansby. And you know what, at this point, if you got 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, which I don't know if you even watched that game, Marcos, why not bring back? See what he's got left in the tank, right?
Yeah, I heard he played pretty well for his age or something. But
yeah, for 44-year-old, he threw a touchdown. He had 120 passing yards. He had a game-winning drive where he was able to complete a pass that put them in field goal range. His defense just let him down at the end against Seattle. It was very, very clear and obvious that he doesn't have the legs. He doesn't have the arm strength anymore. He's pretty hefty. Like, he's probably not 250 pounds anymore. He's probably could play defensive tackle if he wanted to with his weight. But he showcased that he can run an NFL offense mentally, still has enough of the arm to get the ball out physically to be able to at least be a serviceable quarterback replacement as far as a backup in this league, which is crazy to think about at 44 years old. So yeah, like you said, bring back Carlos Dansby. I am really hoping that will be the case. Accelerator also is signing on with all of that, saying Joe Burrow to the Cardinals. I know a lot of people are looking at that, hoping that Joe Burrow will be someone who's available. Like I said, I'd be all for it. I just don't know if the Bengals are going to listen. I don't know if Joe would even want to come here to Arizona for some of the things that we've mentioned. I think it's going to have to be a draft pick that you're going to get on a rookie contract to come in to be able to get that star quality, hopefully finding your own franchise quarterback that way. We got a comment from Red Feather Workshop, Dana, saying that I know some of the sacks were cleanup sacks caused by Nolan Campbell or Stills. That in referring to the cleanup sacks from Josh Sweat. That's something we would agree on. There's still production that you're seeing from sacks, but some of those have been cleanup sacks. He echoes what Mizaki Felix says is he would like to see him generate his own pressures, especially in high-stakes situations. It's really interesting to be able to see that. Yeah, a lot of fans are ultimately in agreement, Marcos, on wanting to see more high-leverage sacks from the Cardinals' highest-paid defender.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because that's exactly why you bring him over, is because it's so that he can make the difference when we need to. I like when we get to Red Feather again on the next comment, I want to go ahead and talk about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about a little bit with John Gaines, though. The question is, why are you going to put them in at fullback and then pass to McBride there? And I think the answer is it's about attention. You look at it where you're going to say, hey, we're going to put in a guy at fullback, or we're going to have Josh Fryer be split out. It draws all the defense's attention to that play, and that let Trey McBride on simply as a mesh route. You had all the defenders off to the side of the screen. You ran a mesh route. It was ultimately, I think, well-designed play to be able to get that touchdown there. It is a little bit baffling as to why would you even have the tight end, the offensive lineman run a route. I think in that scenario, if it's a play that's designed for Paris Johnson Jr., it makes a lot of sense given Paris's athleticism to be able to even have him run a route or catch a touchdown. And we saw a similar play that worked going to the Buccaneers left tackle Tristan Wirfs on the Cardinals just a few weeks prior.
And obviously, that ended up in a touchdown because our defense can't figure out or think to themselves, hey, if they're gonna have him as an eligible receiver and he's basically just gonna do the same thing as a chipping and whatnot, maybe somebody can go defend him. On that play specifically, John Gaines was lined up at fullback in the I formation, and then they had Josh Fryer lined up at wide receiver running that corner route. That's pretty you don't see that. That's
right. Crazy. It's weird and crazy. You don't see it that often. And you know what? It worked. That's one of the craziest things about it. All right. Let's.
Yeah. Alignment out there too.
Exactly. Let's go ahead here. We've got another comment, at least over here, talking about Monty should be fired as well. He single-handedly set this franchise back 3 to 5 years. I said that I don't have a problem keeping Monty. I don't have an issue firing him. I think that it's a lot easier to point at the coaching staff and be able to say that they are susceptible as far as for having some of those issues. What do you think? Do you think that Monty has done enough to keep his job in spite of Jonathan Gannon, or do you think that the Cardinals should just completely clean house and bring in a new vision at head coach and GM?
Yeah, that's difficult because a new GM is not just going to guarantee that he's going to be able to get the draft picks in order or do exactly what he needs to do during during the offseason, because I think somehow like the owner's kind of tied to those decisions. But I will say this, he needs to really do a lot of reassessing on a lot of these trade back situations, or a lot of these situations where I feel like he thinks to himself, if I pull off this move, this is going to end up like playing really great into my hands. Because I don't agree with a lot of things that are posted on Twitter, but one of the biggest ones that I agree in is the move back to get Max Melton. And then there was like 3 or 4, like there was a run at cornerback where all 3 of those cornerbacks are now starters. One of them we just faced off against, and he's having himself like at least some string of good games. I'm not sure how he's doing overall, but he was a second round like cornerback for a reason. Obviously, everybody brings up the same one that we always bring up in you know, the Eagles, the nickel cornerback, and I always forget his name whenever I need to. But of course, then you have the outside cornerback that's starting for the Saints as well, the Kool-Aid McKinstry pick as well. You had those 3 people, and right now Max Melton, we don't know what's going on with him, but he has shown, he has at least put out there that he is not happy with the way that the coaching staff has been handling his usage.
Yep. No, I totally agree there. That's something that's unique. We got one last final comment that will be good for us to go from Red Feather Workshop, saying we lost this game and moved up in the draft. 3 more losses to go. And that is something that we can talk about with Tankathon, because we got an update, at least with this week, Marcos, with our Tankathon standings. We'll go ahead and get this added up to our scene. But we've got the Tankathon results. So here's what the Cardinals had been picking at 8. You got a win from the Washington Commanders, who I believe had been playing. Let me double check here. The Commanders had been playing. I'm doing this on screen for you folks, at least to be able to see, just because I wanted to make sure that I got this team exactly right. It was the Giants, at least. So the New York Giants right now still have the number 1 pick. They have the weakest strength of schedule, followed by the Las Vegas Raiders, who I do think are going to end up with the number 1 pick, all said and done, because the Giants still have to play the Las Vegas Raiders, Marcos. So those top 2 teams are going to play each other in a tank bowl. You also have the Tennessee Titans, and now the Tennessee Titans, as far as for their schedule, they've got a unique spot here. There is a better chance, I think, Marcos, of the Titans hopping up behind the Cardinals than I think the Cleveland Browns or the New York Jets. And you want to know why that is, Marcos? Because when you look at the schedule, the Titans had 2 games that are kind of winnable. You've got a game against the Saints, which has looked a lot tougher now. The Saints went out and beat the Bucs. They beat the Panthers. That Tyler Shuck has been making plays.
Shuck has been showing off.
You also have a Jaguars team that could be resting their starters in the final week of the season against the Titans, which would make sense to hurt them. But you've got the Kansas City Chiefs is the next game on the schedule. Without Patrick Mahomes, they've been a rough, non-playoff, bad team, and now Gardner Minshew is going to have to get the start. If the Titans win just one of those games, their strength of schedule is 0.005% harder than the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if that means that it's going to suddenly shift. If the Cardinals would then pass it up based on the strength of schedule, if the Titans beat a team, perhaps it would not. But that would put them at a 3-11 schedule, would drop them past Arizona, moving Arizona up to the top 5. The unfortunate truth is that the Cleveland Browns and the, I believe it is New York Jets, have difficult schedules that are remaining. Browns play the Bills, the Steelers, and finish the year against the Bengals. That is a pretty rough finish for their schedule. The Jets, likewise, have to play the Bills, the Patriots, and next week they get their one semi-tank bowl game against the New Orleans Saints. If they're able to beat the Saints, the Jets would then drop and push Arizona up to the top 5 spot. But I think right now, with the last remaining games that are left, you would need to see the New York Giants would have to win 2 games. The Vegas Raiders would have to win 2 games. to push the Cardinals up to the number 1 overall spot. Plus, having 3 teams win, they're not picking number 1. Let's just put that out there. They're not picking number 1. Could they pick number 2? They're not picking number 2, not with the way the Giants and the Raiders are playing. Could they pick number 3 if the Tennessee Titans end up winning a game and it drops them down over here? You need to also see the Browns and the Jets be able to also win a game. That doesn't seem as likely. At the end of the day, Marcos, I think that if the Cardinals lose out, they're most likely picking 5th or 6th. I don't see them picking any higher than 5th or 6th because I think that just to get 3 teams with 1 less win than them and the strength of schedule issue, only one of those teams has the opportunity to drop down behind them. The absolute highest, best case scenario for the Cardinals, Titans win a game, drop behind Arizona, and one of the Jets or the Browns win a game, they drop behind Arizona, putting that Cardinals pick at 4th overall. Absolute best case scenario for their draft spot, but I think it is more likely than not the Cardinals will stick at number 6 or maybe drop down to number 5. We knew that the Washington was going to pass them up at some point. Washington was playing the Giants, so the Giants were going to probably lose that game, and the Commanders were going to pop up past there. It was the Saints beating the Buccaneers that really ended up putting this into a nice spot. The other place that was also helpful for the Cardinals was Atlanta. Even if the Cardinals beat the Atlanta Falcons and drop to 4-10, they'll drop back all the way to the 9th overall. I think it was actually, it's 571. They drop back to the 9th overall pick. But even if they beat the Falcons would still be picking 10th because they still have an extra win at that point. The Cardinals would still be picking 1 spot over ahead of the Atlanta Falcons. So the thought of that being a game where the Cardinals beat the Falcons, give the Rams a better draft pick, I don't think that happens this season. What really I think matters for the Cardinals at this spot is if you do want to get an offensive lineman, you've got a great spot right now. It doesn't matter where you're picking. If you want to get a quarterback, you're in striking distance to trade up with the Giants or the Titans. The Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets have more draft picks than you. You have to hope that one of those 2 teams decides to not take a guy this year and wait for the 2027 class. I think the Jets would be more likely for that than the Browns. We'll have to see how Shedeur Sanders plays. But your hope is that the Cardinals can pick top 5, and that is ultimately, Marcos, where I think they'll end up picking is either 5th or potentially 6th when it comes to the NFL draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And my thing is that I want either the New York Giants or the Tennessee Titans to be able to have that number 1 overall pick. Unfortunately, like you just mentioned, we have the resources that we have. It's not like we have unlimited resources when it comes to the type of resources that the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns have, whereas they have more draft picks to be able to do it. They do have a need at quarterback. Shedeur Sanders I'm hoping, is giving him enough confidence to be able to say, okay, let's give him a full year. Let's give him a full preseason. Let's see what this guy can do, if he can perform and whatnot. The New York Jets are the ones that we are definitely in trouble with because they have all those first-round picks. They have the ability to move up and get themselves another franchise quarterback and ruin another franchise quarterback, which, I mean, come on now. Like, you can only pick so high and think to yourselves, okay, maybe it's not the fact that we're picking quarterbacks that high. Maybe it's just the way that our organization is. Let's just hope to God that they decide, you know what, we're just going to take a crack at next year where they have a deeper pool of quarterbacks, because it is basically a 2-quarterback, like two quarterbacks that you think about at the top of this draft that are gonna be the franchise type quarterbacks. After that, it's just, it drops off the cliff. So that's what my hopes are.
Yep. I think that would be a great hope to have as a Cardinals fan. And that's going to wrap it up for our show. We've been here for an hour and 15 minutes almost for the most part. All we've done is been able to talk a little bit about how bad the Cardinals have done in the draft, and that is unfortunate because it has been that sort of a season for Arizona. However, we've had a lot of fun being able to take your comments, being able to talk to some of you guys. We've got a couple of last-minute comments, at least I know, here with Grandizer. Sorry for my dog barking in the background. Shout out to everyone in the stream and watching the chat with Grandizer there. Thank you for Classy Nasty for tuning in. Appreciate you guys for being able to give us that shout out as well. We do not have another episode, unfortunately, coming up after this. Bird and Goal is not going to be here tonight. They've been having some health issues the last couple of weeks, so that's something that we'll have to get back and be able to see you guys next week. We've got the Atlanta Falcons in a very important game for, I think, the Jonathan Gannon era for Arizona Cardinals fans to see, and we're going to hopefully be able to have a great show for you guys next week, just before before the holiday season. We'll talk to you guys then before the Cardinals Christmas with your Redbird Reboot podcast. Marcos, if you want to sign off with where our viewers and listeners can find your content.
Oh, sorry. I was reading Grandizer's his comment, and I was about to say, hey, Grandizer did a really good job of doing that for us and whatnot. He has our Twitter handles right there. He also obviously has where you can find me, where you can find Blake Murphy, and you just search up the Cardinal Rule on YouTube. You'll be able to find it. The archives on the Cardinal Rule. You have other podcasts, obviously, that you could also listen to. I really suggest people look at it from the YouTube side. That way you can see the film and you can see the breakdown.
Absolutely. You can follow Marcos at Pancake Soul on X. You can follow me at X at Blake Murphy 7. Thank you guys again for tuning in. This has been the Redbird Reboot podcast. It's time for us to log off. See you guys and go Cardinals.